for this webinar entitled Edge2Web Flow Server Overview and Demo. I'd like to start the webinar off by just offering a few objectives and agenda. So today we will break the webinar into two parts. One is an overview, which we'll do on our company, products, pricing, and upcoming promotional offers. My commitment to you is that this webinar is not going to be salesy in nature. We're going to go through these topics just so that you've got some background information on who we are as a company for those who have not been introduced to us in the past, and also to be very clear about where we're going with our products and upcoming promotions. We are then hopefully going to jump into a demo of the Edge2Web Flow Server for MindSphere. We got thrown a little bit of a curveball this morning where the MindSphere platform does not seem to be available to us here in the US. And so we're in the process of scrambling to try to switch over how we're going to do that demo to our colleague Eddie Budgen, and hopefully that will work. But apologies in advance if we fumble around with that for just a moment. And then obviously we're going to be taking questions and answers and having follow-on discussion with you. We would ask that you please type your questions in the WebEx chat window, and the recorded version of this webinar, the slide deck, and all of the Q&A will be written up and made available to you on our website within the next few days. So with that, let's jump right into it. Quickly, in one sentence, our company and our products enable industrial leaders like you guys to easily access the data that's available in MindSphere. It can be raw data, it can be analytics, it can be events, it can be files, basically anything you want to access, and use that data to rapidly create new digital applications that can change your business in some fundamental ways. And we're very excited about that. We shipped our first product, Edge2Web Director, earlier this year. The reception to it has been fantastic. Many of you who are on this call are Director users now. And so we're really excited about introducing product number 2, which is the Flow Server. So when you think about Edge2Web, the way to sort of position us is we are a low-code application development tool that was designed from the ground up specifically for industrial applications. So when we think of industry verticals, our definition are things like oil and gas and defense and aerospace and so forth. All of the verticals listed on the left side of this screen, and many others. But basically the model here is that with the help of the Siemens organization, you offload data from your OT infrastructure into MindSphere, which is a wonderful and extremely robust platform, back-end server-side applications that do heavy lifting. You use Edge2Web tools to build those applications and deliver them to your users or to your organization. When you look at our product roster, I'm now happy to say that there are 2 products. Edge2Web Director is the solution you use to build interactive web apps. So these are applications that are user-facing and help organizations to understand visually what's happening in there, react to it, take action, and so forth. Edge2Web Flow Server, as I mentioned a moment ago, is a powerful server-side orchestration solution. So you use Flow Server to build server-side apps that are not necessarily user-facing, but access the data from MindSphere, do meaningful work with that data whenever it's appropriate, write results back into MindSphere, and also whenever it's appropriate, integrate with other enterprise applications and notify applications and users about what's going on. These 2 products run on top of MindSphere, which is, in our opinion, the best industrial IoT platform available today. It's an extremely strong platform for asset-intensive companies and infrastructures. When we say we integrate with MindSphere, it's at a very deep level. So we are a platform native application in MindSphere, which means that you don't have to go through separate processes to register your users, and all of the MindSphere architecture that's set up to manage tenants and subtenants and security and privacy flow automatically to your Edge2Web applications. And we provide you with lots of flexibility for how you can build and deploy apps on the MindSphere platform. When we say that we are platform native, we really mean it. So unlike other solutions you might find out there, which are integrated with a few of the MindSphere platform services, maybe time series and assets and events or other things, Edge2Web solutions are integrated with every service available on MindSphere. Now, MindSphere is a big platform, so we have quite a challenge to keep up with the changes to the APIs for some of these services, but we tend to be right on top of those things, and as changes come forward, we integrate them and make them available to your applications quite quickly. The key message on this slide that I want to bring out to you is that in many cases, MindSphere is not just a read-only platform. It exposes APIs that allow you to write data back to the platform as well. We call that bidirectional access. In those situations, your Edge2Web applications can take advantage of all of that rich functionality. So for example, if you're accessing data from MindSphere, say it's time series information, creating some type of derived value from that data, you absolutely have the ability to write that derivation back to MindSphere Asset or build your own time series and manage them there and that type of thing. So extremely powerful capabilities for integrating with MindSphere and building applications that take full advantage of the expressiveness of the platform. As I mentioned a moment ago, Edge2Web Director is our first product. This is the product you use to build user-facing applications, whether those applications are dashboards or instruction guides for how to start up and shut down a system, or how to take action when a certain type of operating event occurs. You use Director to create those style of applications that really instruct human users about what's going on and how to react to certain conditions. And you can read the different elements on this slide, but basically, if you're using Director, you have access to lots of different tools that make it super easy for you to build interactive web-based applications. FlowServer, on the other hand, which is really the focus of today's webinar, is a server-side orchestration solution. As we'll see in just a moment, it's based on the same Edge2Web infrastructure stack as Director uses, but the goal of FlowServer is different. It's focused more on allowing you to build batch-oriented server-side applications that execute on a defined schedule to access data, do analytics, however you want to manipulate that data, and then in certain cases, write aggregated results back to the platform or integrate with other enterprise applications, whatever you want to do. So when you think of these two products, Director is for user-facing applications, FlowServer is for server-side workhorse applications that typically operate in the background. We will be bringing FlowServer commercially to market in October, but we will update you when it's commercially available, but it's soon. So when you look at us through the lens of a stack, you have this very rich platform at the bottom, Siemens MindSphere, which, as we've discussed, exposes a very rich set of services and APIs. And the first goal is to get your data onto the platform. And the Siemens guys are just absolutely fantastic at helping you do that quickly and properly so that when the data is staged in MindSphere, you've got lots of flexibility for how your applications can use it. On top of the MindSphere platform, the first Edge2Web tier is a connectivity tier. So we provide a very flexible and platform native way for you to connect to those services and make your data available to your applications. On top of our connectivity services, we have the flow editor. So this is a BPM-based tool that allows you to write programs without programming, would be the way I would say it. But it provides you with ways to access the data, manipulate the data either through standard interfaces that we give you or through standard JavaScript if you need to do special types of work, and then do something with that data that you've derived. So you're either writing it back to the platform or you're integrating it with other applications, whatever you need to do. The flow component consists of both an editor that you use to build your applications and a very robust set of runtime services that make all of the execution magic happen behind the scenes. On top of that flow-based tier, we have our two commercial products. On the left-hand side at the top is Edge2Web Director, and you can see the different components of Director that enable you to build applications, visual applications, extremely quickly. And on the right-hand side, you have Flow Server, which basically leverages the tiers below to allow you to take flows that you've already created, schedule them to execute on a frequency that is appropriate for what you're trying to do, and then monitor their execution. So when we look at Flow Server, really the key takeaway here is that it is based on exactly the same BPM flow technology that you've become accustomed to using in Director. So you really only have to learn how to use that flow editor one time. Once you know how to use it, you use it for both of our commercial products, Director and Flow Server. So let's look at a few different use cases for Flow Server. And the ones that we've got listed here are ones that our beta customers are actually doing today. So one use case is asset data aggregation, where you have flows that are executing on whatever schedule is appropriate for you, pulling time series data, aggregating that data into derived values. So time series stuff may be running into MindSphere at once a minute or even at a greater velocity. Here, maybe you're using Flow Server to aggregate those results, create your own time series, and write that aggregated time series back to your asset. You can create these aggregations across subtenants. We have one user in particular that has a whole bunch of subtenants, and they're using Flow Server to aggregate what their subtenants are doing so that they as an organization have a top level view of what's going on. And you can do that for raw data. You can do that for tenant level analytics. So lots of flexibility there. And that is what one of our early Flow Server customers is doing. We've got a couple of guys out there who are using Flow Server to do a very creative automatic device registration workflow. So as physical devices are added into an infrastructure, Flow Server flows are detecting the presence of those devices and sweeping the data into the MindSphere Asset Store to onboard those devices automatically. So that's a pretty cool application of Flow Server. Eventing and human notification, we've got a couple of guys out there today who have got flows that are continuously comparing live performance data, whatever the metrics may be, to the set points that are on each of those assets. And whenever the live data goes outside of the set point ranges, those flows generate events and write those events to the MindSphere Event Store and proactively notify support engineers through the MindSphere notification services to let them know that there's probably something they need to look at. And then the last use case we've got going on is enterprise systems integration. Flows are monitoring production processes that are happening. The data is being reported into MindSphere, and then either when certain events occur or at certain intervals, that data is taken from MindSphere, aggregated as may be appropriate, and then pushed over into other applications that drive the enterprise. In the case of our beta user that's doing this, that data is being pushed into an ERP system. But by no means is ERP the limit. We can basically integrate with any external application that exposes REST endpoints. So lots of flexibility for integrating the data that you're putting into MindSphere with your downstream enterprise applications. From a commercial perspective, if you've been to our website, you will see that for Edge2Web Director, which is the product you use to build user-facing applications, you can see that the basic licensing model is based on concurrent runtime users. I'm not going to spend a lot of time going into this, but essentially the takeaway is that we recognize that we and you together are bringing applications and data into a new and evolving market. Our goal from a commercial perspective is to make the cost bar very low for you when you first get into building your initial POCs or deploying your initial applications out to your user audience. We believe that as you become successful and as your users adopt those applications, embrace them and use them across the organization, that many more users will want access. And so on the long tail of what we're doing together, there will be a great financial benefit for us. And so our belief is that if we help you to get started at a very reasonable cost, then you're going to be motivated to really push the envelope and get your applications out into the hands of lots of users, and together we will succeed. FlowServer is based on a similar objective, but because it's a different product, it has a few different levers associated with it. The primary lever with FlowServer is something called monthly data calls. Our belief is that the value that FlowServer really unlocks for you is when you access data from MindSphere or when you send data to an external system. And so our pricing model is based on this belief that that's really where the value is for you. And so that is the primary driver for the FlowServer pricing model. There are a few other things on here that I would characterize as more cost-based drivers. In particular, this notion of maximum concurrent memory utilization. We're doing this so that we don't end up in a situation where people build runaway flows that gobble up all kinds of memory and negatively impact their neighbors, so to speak. So we have a threshold basically in each one of our subscription tiers that says at any point in time, the accumulation of your FlowServer flows is limited in terms of how much memory it can use. So if you're building server-side applications that are primarily oriented toward moving data from station to station, you're probably not going to hit any type of memory restrictions. On the other side of the coin, if you're building server-side applications that are accessing massive amounts of data and processing of that data to pass it over to business intelligence infrastructure, you're going to probably need to be looking at a higher tier plan because what I just described is a fairly memory-intensive operation. So again, our ultimate goal from a commercial point of view is to really lower the cost threshold to allow you to get going quickly and easily. From a packaging and promotional point of view, on the packaging side, FlowServer will initially be packaged as an add-on to Edge2Web Director. So you're going to need to have a Director subscription, or you're going to need to purchase a bundle that we'll talk about in a moment to use FlowServer. So that's something to keep in mind. To say this another way, we're not going to offer FlowServer as a standalone unbundled product, at least initially. Maybe that will change down the road. In terms of what we're doing promotionally, there are a couple of different cases to discuss. One is you do not hold a Director subscription currently, so you want to get going with both Director and FlowServer. If you want to do that, we are offering a bundle where the first year of your subscription for both Director and FlowServer will be offered at a 25% discount to our list prices. If you are currently a Director customer, the way we will do this is to credit you for whatever the remaining amount of subscription value you have on your Director subscription, and then we will write you a new bundle subscription at the 25% discount and credit any investment you've already made in Director. We will credit that against your new bundled subscription. So the idea is to keep this very simple and to allow you to quickly transition into a bundled type of solution. So in summary, digital industrial applications will encompass a wide range of use cases and requirements. Although some organizations will begin with visual tools, they want to be able to show users the data that they're putting onto the platform. Many applications will also require server-side orchestration, and that's what FlowServer is all about. FlowServer gives you everything you need to build and deploy those server-side apps, and it works in very close coordination with Director for scenarios where you want to build a server-side infrastructure that does batch processing of data, delivers the derived values back to MindSphere, and then makes them available to your interactive applications that are built in Director. Okay, so I'm about to invite Chris Keller, Edge2Web's engineering leader, to do a FlowServer demo. Before I hand you over to Chris, this diagram provides a quick overview of what you'll see in the demo. The demo scenario is a chemical batch process. We have a data simulator that's driving data into the MindSphere time series data store. We want to monitor the temperature of the main reactor tank and notify a human user if something looks crazy. Reading this diagram from left to right, there is a FlowServer flow that reads the temperature data from MindSphere time series on a defined schedule and passes that data to MindSphere's anomaly detection service, which tells the flow if the current temperature is within the acceptable range. If the temperature is bad, the anomaly detection service returns a fault value, and the Edge2Web flow creates an event in the MindSphere event store with the appropriate severity status. A second Edge2Web flow, executing asynchronously on its own schedule, queries the MindSphere event store for new status events. When it finds one, it generates appropriate email message content and sends it to the Edge2Web email notification service. An email is then sent to appropriate recipients containing a link to a relevant Edge2Web dashboard so the recipients can view the current reactor operating status. Chris will actually begin the demo by viewing a generated email message, then viewing the dashboard, and then working backwards to show you the FlowServer components that drive this process. So without further delay, I'll invite Chris to get us into the demo.
Thank you, Fred. Here we are in my inbox as a user that actually got sent an email about an event that happened in my MindSphere system. The email itself has a little bit of information about the event. So it's a temperature anomaly that was detected. And the email provided me with a nice little link here to Edge2Web Director that can then show me more information about the event and its related asset. So I'm just going to click that link and jump over to the little dashboard that I've got associated with that link. And you can see that it's showing me the information, some of which we already saw over in the email, that an anomaly was detected on the temperature. I also get information about the asset, its location, some key performance indicators, and I also have a graph here that shows me that the event did happen within this time frame that I've got here, and that the temperature went up to 300 degrees, which is 91 degrees over the normal temperature. So from here, the user can find out more information about the asset, and we've supplied a link to a diagnostic page where a user can walk through a guide that will show them more details associated with the asset and the metrics associated with that asset. But what I want to do is actually show you how this anomaly got generated. So I'm going to flip over to our new product that we're adding called FlowServer. And FlowServer has a scheduler component associated with it where I can say run flows on a schedule. And you can see the first flow in this list of flows that are scheduled, which when they're scheduled, we call them tasks, is one that is detecting anomalies. And it's scheduled to run every 5 minutes on a cron job. And we're going to take a look at what that flow did. And so let's click into the detect anomalies flow. And it's going to take us over to the flow editor. This flow editor is exactly the same flow editor that you use to build visual components, but it's also useful for building components that are going to run on the flow server, which is the way that this has been designed. So the flow itself is fairly straightforward. It's getting the reactor temperature for a time frame, and then it's taking that and it's feeding it into the MindSphere anomalies service to detect any anomalies that are in that time range for the temperature. We've already trained a model associated with what the reactor temperature should look like, and so we're just passing in that model ID into the anomaly service along with the recent time series data that we've pulled out of the MindSphere time series service. If the anomaly service detects any anomalies, it will return a list of the anomalies back from the service, and we're going to check it to see if any were found. So if there were anomalies greater than 0, so 1 anomaly, 2 anomalies, etc. If we do have anomalies, then we actually create a MindSphere event associated with that anomaly, and we put in some of the information that we saw on the other page. We associated a severity with it. We gave it a type, which is a MindSphere standard event. I told it that the source is analytics, and put a little description here that will then be associated with any downstream looking into this event. So at this point, the event went into MindSphere, but nothing really happened with it. But if you went into MindSphere and looked at Fleet Manager, you'd be able to see this event associated with the asset. So now the question is, well, how did the email get to me if this event is just sitting out there in MindSphere? So that brings me to another part of Flow Server that we used to actually create an event pump that looks for new events coming into MindSphere and then perform some sort of action on them. So let's go back over to the Flow Server. So over here, the second flow you can see in my list is one called Process Events. That one is running a little more quickly. It's running every 60 seconds, so it's looking for events that, in this case, we pass a filter that's asking for any unacknowledged new events that have come in since the last time this ran. And let's take a look at how that processing happens. So just going to click here again to open up that flow. And what we'll see in that flow is that it basically is going to the MindSphere event store, finding new events associated with the filter, and then if any new events are found, it basically calls an event processing flow. And so let's dive into that flow. So this is calling another flow, so that's for reusability, so we can have nice compartmentalized flows that are easy to read, but also reusable. So I'm just going to pop into that flow. And you can see the first step in the flow after it starts and gets its information is to decide what type of event handler to call. And so here we've got a pretty simple script associated with that, but this script could be more complex in terms of figuring out what handler to call. So in this case, it actually came down and called the email handler. So it came through this path. And that actually called another flow passing in the event that it received. And then that flow just used the email service to send an email that has that information that I saw in the email that we started in the inbox. And so with that, that really is how the event got to my inbox. But what's interesting about this is that we're not storing anything in Edge2Web. We're just acting on the data that's available inside of MindSphere. So we're using the Flow Server to execute analytics. Those analytics are detecting issues. They're then pumping the events into the MindSphere event store, associating that with the asset that had the event associated with it. And then we have other parts of the system, in this case, another flow that's actually picking up those events to do more complex processing on them. Kind of backing up to some of the types of processing that you might do on events. You might want to call an external ticketing system to put into an ERP system, something that says somebody needs to be scheduled to go out and look at this, for example, or they're just going to come up instead of in an email system, it's going to come up in a ticketing system. Or perhaps we just want to auto-acknowledge the event because it's something that's already in progress of being taken care of, and we don't want somebody to be looking at this because it's an event that's already been handled. And so that you may acknowledge the event. So basically calling back to the event store and updating it to say that the event has already been handled. Or we may do nothing if the event doesn't have an appropriate event handler associated with it and just end the flow. So you can see just on this, that event could have come into the system from anywhere. It didn't have to come in from the anomaly detection flow, because there are nice built-in rules that you can use in MindSphere to actually do detection themselves. So whether you used MindSphere rules, whether you use MindSphere analytics to produce those events, you can then use something like this event pump to periodically pull in the current events and then process them. So that's how this demonstration was all put together, and I think it shows the tremendous value that you can get out of both MindSphere and Edge2Web, especially when used in conjunction with FlowServer.
So just to tie a bow around this, there are two flows that are operating in the background for this application. One flow is reading time series data and detecting anomalies by using the MindSphere anomaly detection service. And if it detects an anomaly, it's writing that anomaly information to the MindSphere event store. And then there's another flow that is repeatedly reading from the MindSphere event store to determine whether there are events that need a notification generated on them. And when it finds one that needs a notification, it's generating an email notification and sending that to a human user and providing them with a link to a dashboard that gives them more information about what's going on.
That's right, Fred. Exactly. One other thing I just want to show is that we have some really powerful constructs that can be applied inside of the flows. So besides being able to just assign data or do decisions on data and such, or call other flows, you can actually do things like execute a flow in parallel. So let's say, for example, I didn't want to just send an email notification here, but I wanted to actually do something like set the acknowledgement on and send an email link, but I didn't want to have the flow hanging around for those two things that are independent to sequentially execute. I could actually perform those two links in parallel. I can also trap any errors that are happening inside of here. And one of the other really nice things associated with the flow server is that you get a very nice set of logs with the flows that are executing. So you can see their output if no anomalies have been detected, or if in this case we did have an anomaly detected at 12:20, which was the one that we showed in the demo. So besides being able to schedule the flows, you can look at any issues associated with the flows or just the normal inputs and outputs to the flows to make sure that everything is performing as you would expect.
All right, thank you very much. Hopefully everyone who's watching this can take away that even though we're showing a simple use case here, we have a couple of flows that are complementary to each other, each operating independently on their own schedules, doing work that is important to monitoring assets and notifying human users in situations where problems may be occurring.